please.
Appreciate it. Really appreciate it, Ariel. And I would say I would count you among those ordinary citizens that you said that care about things, and I would count every single person sitting on this meeting among those ordinary people that care. And and that is truly the the foundation and kind of part and parcel of everything that we're doing with the petition and also on the local front in terms of staying engaged on the local level in parallel with the petition. And Nicole knows all about that, and Urbana, and I'll talk about that at the end or at some point about staying engaged as citizens and staying focused and staying observant. And in a lot of ways, Nicole and her community in Urbana are leading the way. Nicole, I'll shout you out. Champaign County, we just confirmed, was the first county to reach its 5% signatures goal. So that's a lot having to do with Nicole. I think you're the county lead up there, right, Nicole? Yeah. So that's hats off to you, man, and I'm happy that you're here. And Nicole's community in Urbana as well is in a lot of ways, one of a small handful of communities forging a path in how to approach their city council and I won't necessarily say amicably, but somewhat amicably and at least peacefully persuade their city council to start to reverse some of the train that has gotten so far out of control down the tracks. So Champaign County and the city of Urbana specifically is a good place to look to. So I'm grateful for her and all of you guys as well for the chance to talk and everything like that. And again, to your point, Ariel, for me, like it really started. I had no idea until about this. I was working as my little blurb or the meeting registration link states. I was working at a corporate law firm in downtown Cincinnati called Bricker, Grade and Wyatt, and I had worked there since 2019. I started as a paralegal there, and then I went to law school at night for 4 years. And while I was working there, and then in the interim of that, I became a law clerk, kind of like a permanent law clerk, if you will. And then I took the bar in 2024 and passed the bar and became an attorney. And I truly had every intention of working there and staying there. And I had aspirations, to be a leader in the firm. And I don't think it's unreasonable to say that, that was within the arc of my career. But in November of 2025, I see Mr. Wessel, you mentioned Piqua. That will forever be, I'll always remember that because Piqua, Ohio was the first time I became aware of this at all. I worked in a different group of the firm. You may be aware that firm works in various capacities, sometimes difficult to understand, but various capacities on the side of on developing these data centers, which I was fully unaware of. I worked in a different area of the firm and everything, but I didn't, and I happened to see something on Facebook actually that was shown to me by my wife, who is also herself a big part in this, and I'm sure I'll mention her more than this one time. But I saw in November of 2025 a thread, I guess, from Piqua of people upset at the firm that I worked at, and I didn't even know what it was about. All that I saw was people that were frustrated and upset, and that made me feel that was like a shock to me, to be honest. Perhaps that was naive, but it was. So I was surprised by that and dismayed. And so I didn't even know what it was about, literally. And I just printed out some copies and I took it to a meeting and said, I don't know what this is. I don't know if this is true or not at all, but I would like to talk about it. And one of the topics of this meeting was like so-called firm culture. And so I thought that fit perfectly. into the meeting. These people are upset, like, just to talk about it. And I ended up just basically standing up and walking out of that meeting, not like in a tizzy, but it was just like, it was very clear to me. I just said, okay, I get, this is not the topic that you all were interested in. So feeling very conflicted, I left, and in the intervening months, I had conversations with different people, concerned about this, kind of that went to the same place, and there was an idea that was given to me, that the concept of, our clients, we might not love what our clients are doing, but we are good people, so that makes everything okay, is kind of the thing that was said to me. And ultimately, I could not square with that. And so on February 6th, in late January, I came across another this time a news article that named my firm by name, having to do with their involvement in the Mount Orab data center development. And so it was like 10 o'clock at night, and I was what you might call doom scrolling, because at this time, this was like late January, mid-January, and I just felt I had this knot in my chest, and ultimately I just knew right then and there, like, I just have to quit and resign. And so I took 2 weeks and got my stuff in order. I didn't, because the people I work with, I like mentors that I expected to have as mentors for a long while, and and I knew it would take them by surprise and everything. But I simply said, I'm at a moral compromise here, and I cannot continue to operate in such a compromised way. I have to look at my kids. I have to, be able to look back on my life and feel like I did the right thing. And to me, this very much was a moral. I said this on this NPR show, which I think I sort of shocked this lady on this NPR show. But I did say, I don't know if this is the part that shocked her, but I'll get to that in a minute. But I told the firm, I gave them the respect of being honest and straight with them, and because for me this is a moral compulsion, and so I took my retirement out in a lump sum, and got involved. So I'll put a pin in that. I'll come back to that part of the story. But the other critical part of, I guess, my own personal journey is that in August of 2025, so just a few months before that Piqua thing that I saw. I moved out here to Brown County, Higginsport, Ohio, right on the Ohio River. And I had grown up in like Anderson and Eastgate area. Ariel and Becca, you will be familiar with that, but it's kind of couple of the immediate suburbs of Cincinnati. And I grew up very much in a bubble. I was very educated. I actually have a graduate degree in fiction writing. I have a master's in fine arts that I did before I became a lawyer and before I went to law school and everything. So, I'm well educated, and I had an idea of, systemic oppression. I had an idea of colonialism. I had an idea of hegemonic discourse, racism, all of these topics and concepts that I had devoted quite a bit of my time and thought to. But I had not actually critically come out and lived in these areas. I had experienced other things, but specifically with these rural areas, what people call hillbillies. My wife grew up that way, and she went to my same school and faced criticism and things like that. And so I truly, and with her help too, my eyes really became open to that. So it was kind of the parallel tracks of my eyes becoming open to the realities of the communities out here that have been sort of left in the lurch by the last time that a corporate interest came out here and convinced all the community members to put all of their eggs in the corporate basket and say, if you let us do what we want with the land, we'll set up housing for you, we'll set up a shop for you, we'll set up your communities, we'll do right by you. And the end of that story was my wife's great grandfather dying of black lung in a hospital bed. So I learned firsthand that that time, the coal mines and the things like that, is people still very much feel that that was not very long ago. That was people's fathers, grandfathers, and in the case of my wife, great grandfathers. And so that's part of the thing that I think has brought people together so passionately with this, is that again, it it in my opinion, it is literally, they're trying to do the exact same. These developers are essentially trying to sell the same bill of goods to the same people the second time. Hey, we're going to give you jobs. Don't worry. Just let us put this thing in. It's going to be fine for the environment. Don't worry. It's all going to be good. Just trust us. Just believe us. And I've said this before to everybody I talk to. People do not fall for that twice. It is, in my opinion, it is nothing short of an insult to uh, essentially try to pull the same thing over on somebody. And to make matters worse, these developers are in fact using the fact that these communities are so-called blighted to as further leverage to say that they should let the data centers come in. And to me, that is even worse of an insult, to be like, dude, look what we did to you the first time. Trust us, we'll fix it the second time. People rightly so do not trust that. And then when you put on top of it the fact that pretty much the state over in local governments, that they have done this under the cover of NDAs, they have done this over the slow bleed of years where they tell people it's for one thing and it's really for another thing. And then you have government communities, or government elected officials, on the one hand, just a few months ago saying, we just want to understand more about them, right? And then you have citizens coming in and teaching them more about these data centers, and now they're just saying, well, you're lying. We're not going to listen to you. You're crazy. You're a radical. This and that. So even in the course of a couple months, their narrative has shifted from like a position of, well, we didn't know, maybe we got tricked, to straight up hostility, and not allowing people to comment anymore at public meetings. So add all of these ingredients together, and as Ariel said, you have a lot of citizens who are very hurt, very frightened, very full of memories of all the ways that their communities have been harmed in the past, and finally ready to try to do something to stop it. So for me, and Mr. Parsons, I think you said you just found out, dude, just a couple months ago. I didn't know anything either, man. So no, we're all the same. We're all trying to figure out it as we go. And so I resigned on February 6th. I had to get my little like LLC set up. I got malpractice insurance. I got health insurance for the fam. And then by March I was kind of ready to go, and so I went to one of the meetings in Mount Orab, which is again Brown County, right by me. And actually, sorry, first, just a couple days before that, again, my wife, and part of what my wife has been doing is she moved home to Georgetown, which was interesting for her, and her accent came back, which was pretty cool. She'd always had this, quote unquote hillbilly accent. Usually it would come out when she was mad at me or something. And our relationship would only come out if she got fired up. But now, it came back, which was really interesting. And it comes and goes, and she also has a writing background. So she's been just writing her story, and she's written it down, but she's also been like posting it like incrementally. And so the act of her writing her story and sharing her story that way connected her with one of the group of people in Adams County. And Adams County is one of the counties across the state that is what I would call more in dire straits. I think the entire state is in the 11th hour with these data center developments, especially given there's already about 200 of them. But Adams County is what you might say like the 59th minute of the 11th hour. And that's because a lot of that area is unzoned. And so when you have so contrast a place that you have, like, for example, I'll just use a city. If a data center is trying to come in where there's a city, there are a number of hurdles that have to happen. They have to, for example, persuade the city council to change the zoning. They have to persuade the city council to, do this and that, potentially create like a CRA, community redevelopment area, I believe it's called. The R might be something different, but essentially this vehicle to kind of develop. And so they have to do all these things. And so likewise, you can like kind of catch them on that if they make a mistake, or like I mentioned in the example of Urbana, depending on the city council that you have, you can have a council that says, hold on, we're gonna walk this back. Contrast that with a place like Adams County that's more rural, that doesn't have zoning. They are dealt with, they have a township trustees in some examples that are much less, they don't have a need to do the same things that a city does. And so it's not a knock on them. They just aren't as sophisticated. And so it's a much clearer road for a data center developer to come through. And so likewise, there are fewer hooks that you can, from a legal standpoint, or even from just a community pressure standpoint, to get them to slow them down. And so you have to contemplate, what I would call more drastic measures, such as seeking the removal from office, which we attempted in Adams County. And I won't get into that, but that I represented a client there, and we attempted that, and we failed on that. So we'll have to think of something different, and part of it too is like, I'm not afraid to fail. We have to try something, and this is not my background. And I always tell people that who ask me to represent them, like, I'm learning this as fast as I possibly can, and I have ethical obligations, and I can't, I won't take a case that I don't feel like I can competently handle. But, as I said, this is a moral compulsion, and it goes beyond, whether my ego, it goes beyond anything really, because I fully believe that these are such a danger to our communities in a lot of different ways. And I know I'm kind of going all around, but I'll go back to that Mount Orab meeting on March 3rd that I went to. And I met somebody there by the name of Nick Owens, who himself is an attorney as well. And he had done, and this is a theme too, I joined up with a lot of people who already were doing great work and fighting the good fight and being alerted to these things and pushing back and starting to educate themselves. And so Nick Owens had done, in my opinion, a wonderful job in Mount Orab, trying to get clarity. And he and a city councilman named, a gentleman named Eric, and eventually village council, that's a village. The other council members, they do have a moratorium in place. And I believe that they have also, they did this sort of emergency zoning to kind of pave the way for the data centers. And I believe they're in the process of reversing that emergency zoning. But at any rate, at that meeting on March 3rd, I met Nick Owens, and I said, hey, I'm a lawyer. I just quit my job at this firm. I'd like to help. Let's think of something. What can we do? I know there's a lot of communities out here that are facing these things. Let's, and so I got his number, and I think that was a Tuesday. And by like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I think we had like some late calls 3 nights in a row. And I think maybe Thursday night, between the two of us, we were just like, well, these are all over the state. These are advancing rapidly all over the state. The state legislatures, the senators, governor, you name it, are clearly not doing anything, and are clearly, in many cases, straight up hostile, and are inexplicably, although perhaps easily explicably, in fact, advancing the interests of the developers against the interests of their constituents. We alighted on the constitutional amendment, which solves 2 of those problems, which is that it allows it's statewide, so it applies to the entire state, and it bypasses the legislature entirely. And it's a way for the people of Ohio to exercise their voice. Like this, to me, this is a textbook example of the time when they need to exercise their voice directly for the future of their state. And again, these are so widespread, and the legislature is so disinterested or reluctant, or whatever you want to say, to do anything about it. So the statewide amendment solves both of those problems. It creates its own set of problems, which was, getting it through the two initial hurdles, the ballot board and the attorney general, and then the signature piece. So there's obviously, okay, so we thought, okay, that's a good idea. And it solves the two main problems, which is how do we do something effective enough and quickly enough and all that. And so then we set to work, looking at the law and the statutes to make sure that like our amendment, fit within the statutes, because you're only allowed to have like one topic. It has to be, you have to submit a summary that's accurate, all these little rules that you have to comply with. And so we had a couple of, so really, and we were like, okay, we'll try to get this done over the weekend. And so, or maybe it was another week, it might've been another week that elapsed. But anyway, and one of the other difficult parts was doing all the research to figure out like so I'll say what we decided on was the constitutional amendment, the proposed amendment to add to the Ohio Constitution a section that prohibits the construction of a data center. And that is the operative phrase of the amendment. So if it's added in there, it'll say the construction of a data center is hereby prohibited. Now, the devil is in the details of those words, specifically the two terms that we defined. And we defined the term construction and we defined the term data center very carefully in that amendment. And so in general terms, we tried to cast a very wide net with those two definitions because, we were, as you do it, when you go through law school and as a lawyer, it's always basically the entire thing is an exercise in like devil's advocate and planning for contingencies. And so we basically tried to like imagine every possible argument that somebody could make or hole that somebody could poke, and try to, so we cast as wide a net as possible for the definition of a data center and the definition of construction. Because what if they, convert an existing facility? Well, that still constitutes construction under the amendment. What if they say they're just, storing computer data or something? That's a bad example, but like, we tried to account for as many loopholes as we could. And then on that, so then we said, okay, we're satisfied with this really wide definition because we don't want anybody to, put a data center in, secretly or with a loophole or whatever. And then we started thinking, okay, what problems might arise? Did we make this too wide? And so that's when we started to look into and incorporate the 25 megawatt part of it, because two things actually, two thoughts went into that. The first was, if we didn't have that, because we chose to be so broad about the definition, we were worried that theoretically, we would accidentally ban the construction of like legitimate like IT infrastructure that like actual Ohio businesses would need. For example, like the example we had was like Kroger, which is like the big grocery chain. Now, I don't love Kroger in the kind of the monopoly that it's trying to have, but for this example, I don't think that if they built like a computer warehouse for their like servers, that's not a data center, And we were worried that, it's arguably though, if we didn't put the size thing in there, that could be caught up in the definition in the amendment. And then so many people would catch that easily and be like, dude, what are you doing with this thing? It's banning every construction of any computer thing, So we wanted to, obviously knowing that an effort this wide needs to get the widest amount of support. And also we didn't want to, get tripped up on something so simple as that then like a court would interpret it and take away the teeth of it because we were accidentally too wide and caught up everything under the sun. So to solve that, we started looking at like the primary research and the primary sources of like data center energy consumption. And we also looked at what other states were contemplating doing in terms of, banning the sort of larger ones. And so we thought that banning the large ones was reasonable. It solved the issue of, like I said, being too broad and accidentally catching up everything that then could potentially unwind the petition, and also shooting for widespread support. What's funny is, uh, I myself, my personal preference would have been like, I've said before, I don't want a single more shovelful of dirt moved anywhere in the globe for a data center. That's my personal stance. But obviously, we anticipated people coming at this from all kinds of, angles, some maybe wanting data centers or whatever. So like I said, we tried to be reasonable with the statewide thing. And the interesting observation that I've made is that one of the most common things that people have to say is like, uh, you didn't go hard enough with it. And so one, the amendment is what it is at this point. But two, it's interesting that people were in fact wanting more. And so my answer to that is, that's where staying involved at the local level comes in. And so even if you have a community that has a smaller one that is going to come in, that would be theoretically permitted under the amendment, it's up to your community to, work on that. And so, and that's what I would say is the parallel effort with the statewide petition is, because obviously this petition is going to take the amount of time that it takes. And so, accordingly, I guess these developers have continued to push the progress and, push the gas on these. And so it's kind of developed into something of a race, with these, because obviously they're aware of this. And I think at the beginning, they certainly laughed at us. I don't know that they're laughing right now. They still may not be serious about it. And that's fine. We certainly are serious about it. So the longer that they are not, that's fine. But at the same time, in my mind, when I try to think about ways to continue to counter this and resist these developments, I assume that they're about as serious as one gets about these. And so staying involved at the local level is critical, because one of the questions that people also ask about this is, what about data centers that are like halfway built? And that's a tricky question, because if you look at the amendment, it says the construction of a data center is hereby prohibited, and it has a definition for construction, which is obviously what you would think. And so certainly like starting from scratch would be prohibited. That's easy. If let's assume this amendment gets put in place, building one over 25 megawatts from scratch, that's a no-brainer. Underneath, again, under the amendment, that would be okay, but it would be up to the communities to decide what they wanted to do. But the tricky part is that people have asked, and it's a great question to ask, and one that, we asked at the beginning is, what if it gets like halfway, right? Because then you have a data center that's halfway built, let's say on a Monday, the constitutional amendment takes place, and on a Tuesday, they go back with their shovels and their equipment and all that stuff. And, if you took a snapshot of what they were doing, they would be on that day constructing a data center, which would be on that day prohibited under the amendment. Now, there's not an answer to that question as we sit here right now. And the reason is because that's what a court would have to decide. That would almost certainly be that's one of those things that has to get litigated to get an answer. And so even at the point, and this is one thing that Nick and I talked about when we were putting this together, even the deterrent effect of doing this petition and at minimum forcing them to litigate the issues, that means something as well. The fact that they know there's a group of people out there pushing back on them, that's something they have to feel that, and so to them, because the reality is that they have resources that the human mind cannot even fathom. They have amounts of money that I can't even in the abstract get my mind around, so pretty much we have to make them do their cost benefit analysis, and make it more costly for them to do it than not. And so even knowing that we're out here is part of it. So, but anyway, my answer so what I know today, which is different than what I know tomorrow, but based on what I know today, my answer to that tricky question would be this. The basic arguments would be this. the data center developer would argue, hey, when I started the construction of this data center, the world existed in a different way, and there wasn't this amendment on there. And I have a vested interest. I've now, put money up or whatever and have a vested interest in seeing this construction done, right? Like, so I ought to be able to rely on the world as it was at the time that I started. So I should be able to get like grandfathered in, if you will. And that argument is that's not a new argument. Courts typically, especially with criminal laws, you can't look backwards. You can't put a new law in the books that says it's a crime to wear, a striped shirt tomorrow and then say you wore one yesterday, you're going to get arrested for that. With civil stuff, it's a little bit different, but the rules still, courts still look to that rule. So that's a strong argument. The argument against that would be kind of, again, in layman's terms, like buyer beware. I would say you knew this amendment was, you knew this was in the works, so you should have known when you started. And certainly, so you're not entitled. The world, in fact, wasn't exactly as you state that it was. It was a world that was pushing for you not to do this. So those are the two basic arguments. Do I have a right to rely on it? Or like you built this at your own risk, knowing very well that you could be prohibited from doing it. So in layman's terms, as this is just based on what I know, looking into it right now, that's how I would frame the issue. And my argument, I certainly would, if I had the opportunity to stand up and make it, would be, you took that risk. You should not be entitled to be grandfathered in. And under the plain language of the amendment on this Tuesday, you're putting shovels in the ground to make a data center, and that's now prohibited. So you're prohibited. So that's one of the that's probably, I would say, the most difficult question to answer, about these. But anywho, that's for a later date. Right now, we're focused on the signatures. And so, and actually, does anybody have any questions on this? I feel like I'm just kind of going on a rant right now, but I'm happy to talk. Like if anybody wants to while we have like 20 minutes or so. But I can keep talking about other angles of this too, because I had a couple other pieces as well that I wanted to touch on.
Austin.
Yeah.
So there are a few people on the call that I invited. And I will leave that up to them whether they want to ask their questions to you. They may just choose to want to connect with you because they're concerned with some data centers that are coming to their area and just kind of maybe are looking for some resources or guidance or what they can do to, I guess, help, resist,
Yeah.
that sort of thing. So they are on the call, but I just want to let them know that in case I want you to maybe kind of elaborate on how, if you want them to just put their contact information in the chat, but Marilyn or Marcia, I think it is. If you guys have anything that you want to ask him, okay. So Austin put his email in the chat. But, so yeah, Marilyn and Marcia, if there's anything you want to ask, I'm just opening that opportunity to you guys. But I did invite them because
Perfect.
they're looking for some guidance. But anyway,
Yep.
I'll leave that up to them if they want to speak up.
Yep. Marilyn and Marcia, feel free to put it in the chat or shout out or email me. Email is the best way to get in contact with me. I will always try to answer the emails. What's up, Marcia? I see you came on.
Hi. So I do have a data center coming right next to me, as probably many people on the call do. And I've been educating myself on this. And I keep coming back to the question of two questions, really. What is the most important thing for me to do as someone who's willing to do a lot?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, what is the most important ask that I make of people that are willing to do one thing?
Yep. I would say the most important thing for you. So I just put my email in there and I put our website in there. The petition is all the petition stuff you can get through the website.
Yeah.
But I would say the most important thing for you to do, Marcia, is use your voice. Talk to your neighbors.
Totally.
Don't be afraid to literally just talk to people. The craziest, I've made a number of strange observations about this because I never have done anything like this in my life, but one thing that's interesting is people, they hide their fears, in my opinion, and they when they hide their fears, and I've done this in my life too, and so I can speak from literally personal experience. When you hide your fears, that your fears grow and they become huge and they paralyze you. And when you're paralyzed, the easiest thing to do appears to be to go, often appears to be to go with the
Yeah.
flow or go with what you're used to, which is just letting the government do whatever it wants, kind of, or
Yeah.
trusting corporations or thinking that, they're not nefarious when in fact they very much are.
Yeah.
So,
I'm
but
going to interrupt you for 1 second
yeah,
because
yeah,
actually in this area, I'm in the Darby Accord area, which is
okay,
protecting the Darby Creek, and every single person I'm talking to is against the data center being built.
okay, all right.
And
So,
so, like, most of them, there was a petition going around
okay.
from a local environmental group, which in my experience as an activist is not very useful.
Do you have what type of government are you talking? Is it a village council, township,
It's a
city?
township that has put in a moratorium for 6 months,
Okay,
but I'm also learning that through the power siting department of the state that, a power company could, I mean, a data center could go through the state without having to be involved with our township. So,
okay. So here's what I would say down to the nitty gritty. Well, let me ask you this. Are your township trustees, what's the situation with them? Are they hostile to the constituents? Are they saying we want to help, but our hands are tied? What's the
no, they put in
situation?
a moratorium there. They do not want a power, they do not want a data center built here
Okay.
in our
So,
township and in this Darby Accord area.
okay. So I would say to the extent that the township trustees are able, just keep putting up roadblocks for them.
Yeah.
So if you can identify any roads that and this is, me just talking strategy, like,
Yeah.
you know, if you can one thing that township trustees have authority over is the roads of the townships. And so one idea is to introduce, on top of the moratoriums, a
Yeah.
resolution or an ordinance or something,
Okay.
basically with the idea being you restrict the use of that road so that, for
Oh,
example,
okay.
the equipment or the boulder, whatever can't go on that. Now, just as many of these little things, now all these things, they could be completely ignored, right? But
Right.
at least you're putting hurdles for them at least to think
Right.
about,
Okay.
and if it comes to the point of litigation, you can, that could be moved into so
Yeah.
all of those little things. So I would say spreading awareness, but it sounds like you already did that, and you have a good coalition of people, constituents who understand the issues and are against it. Number two would be to then ply your elected officials and see who is on your side, which they all should be, but many of them
Yeah.
are not, and get them to do whatever they can in
Yeah.
terms in whatever their purview of authority is, whether it's like you said, a moratorium, whether it's zoning, if you have county commissioners or whoever that are able to do zoning and sort of try to zone it out.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that, and this is such a tricky situation, but because the other thing, unfortunately, is start getting your ducks in a row for potential litigation. Identify property owners that are nearby. Those are good potential plaintiffs that, would be damaged potentially from the data center, whether it's like a nuisance action or this or that, another good example is somebody who like had one example would be like a business who had like a wedding venue is the example that I usually give, who they schedule couples like years in advance, and then
Yeah.
a couple says like, I'm gonna back out of my contract because of this data center,
Right. Okay.
that's potentially, identify people with potentially actionable claims.
Okay.
And then the other thing is, there are communities that are, if you have contact information for the developers, literally messaging the developers and saying, we don't want you here, so
Yeah.
those
I,
aren't
I,
great.
I talked to somebody else today. I'm calling them tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah. And it takes guts, Marsha, for sure. They have stacked this so heavily. They have stacked the deck so thoroughly and so heavily, that it is breathtaking to me, how much I find out and how much you can do. But the only
Yeah.
thing I would say is just chip away at it and stay on the path and keep talking to people and
Yeah. Yeah.
get involved with the petition if you haven't already.
Yeah, I'm definitely
Um,
interested in that.
the other piece as well, so that's kind of like the head-on piece. The other piece as well, and this is where I'm not so well versed, but I've been trying to like recruit people about this, is I don't know what your like the environmental piece, whether or not they've got permits, or whether or not you've got like protected areas. One of the things in Adams County that we're trying to leverage is the presence of endangered bird species on
Well,
our.
we do have that. And so there's a huge environmental, a lot of conservation in this area. Within 1 mile of the proposed data center, 1,300 acres are
Okay.
officially conserved. In the wetland right next to me, there's two endangered birds and an endangered frog.
Okay.
But who
So
cares about that? I mean, I know I care about it, but
yeah,
who
it's
with
tricky.
power cares about that?
Right. Nobody. Dude, one thing that someone said
Right,
in Adams County, I swear to God, he was like, so I don't even know who it was, but I do trust that the person who gave me this quote, he was like, we've got plenty of frogs and toads. We don't need these others. Like,
right.
to me, that makes me sick to my stomach. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not even joking. Like, I literally feel ill when somebody says something like that. Like, for me, like I don't have a choice but to do this, because it would be like, I just can't understand how a human being can truly espouse that belief and then articulate it to somebody and then take action in furtherance of that belief. Like, I
So
don't.
who with power is there? I mean, the EPA is pretty pitiful in Ohio these days.
Yeah,
Is there any governmental agency in Ohio that cares about endangered?
other than, I mean, to be honest, I haven't encountered one,
Is
because
there are
go ahead.
are are there laws? Again, when you're talking about litigation, are there laws we
Yes.
could call on?
You can, the environmental piece is where I've been and I've tried to recruit a couple different. I've tried to talk to other. I'm trying to talk to other lawyers as much as I can, because I'm only one person,
Right.
and but there is such a reluctance to for any institutional weight to get behind this. We've been told, even in the petition effort, like, we've been told through the grapevine, like, people want to give you money, but they're like literally afraid to sign a check because and put their name on the check because of big tech. Like, and I said to the NPR lady, like, okay, don't help us then. We'll do it. We'll still keep trying. Like, if you don't want to put your name, don't. We'll put our names out there. So I don't like, at this point, I think I would talk to those areas, like, if you haven't already, the ones, like, the people who are literally working in those conservation areas, like even in Urbana, the Cedar
Yeah.
Ball.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. That was incredible.
yeah, so other than people like what Ariel said, citizens that care, I have yet to find a state apparatus that is willing to
Yeah.
do anything. Oftentimes
Yeah.
with these EPA permits, they just rubber stamp. So if you can get, Ariel, I got you. One more thing to Marcia, like, anybody that's willing to do public records requests to try to pull the permits of what they've got. Public records requests are powerful, which incidentally, they're trying to do away with those as well.
As of
But
March 20th.
yep. So public records requests, and getting clarity and things like that, and just getting anybody who's willing to help start digging up information, because the information is there and the blunders are there, because the how fast they tried to do this, they've made blunders in areas, and so it takes a little bit of digging, but once you get some of it and get a little momentum, then you can work with that. But it's
Okay.
difficult to dig up some momentum, and and you can send me an email and I can send you some additional resources, Marcia, if you want.
Okay.
Um,
Thanks.
but we truly have to rely on ourselves. And I
Yeah,
wish I
I get
weren't
that.
saying that, but I
I,
believe that's the
yeah,
truth.
I get
Ariel,
it.
what were you going to say?
Well, what I was going to say is the larger context here is many, many years of enormous corruption in
Yes.
Ohio. One of the other examples is House Bill 6, which is the largest corruption case in state history. Um, and basically, fossil fuel and nuclear interests were able to buy off the regulatory group that should have been protecting us by putting one of their own inside people at the head of the what's the commission?
Fuco.
Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. So
Yep.
So we're in an emperor's new clothes kind of situation where we're all the little boys saying the emperor is naked, and you know, this kind of outrage and the fact that you have so much integrity as citizens, all of you who are working on this. I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about the those of you who are circulating petitions. What talking points are that you're passionate about are resonating with people that whose eyes you're opening?
Is that for me or for anybody? I'm happy to let other people go talk on
You and other people, like what are, your story is very powerful, Austin, and also um, was it you, Nicole, whose house was almost gobbled up?
No, my house is about a half a mile from where the proposed site would be in our county. But my talking points with people, it depends on, I meet them where they are. If it's a farmer, I talk about, you know, the extensive farmland that this would destroy. Obviously, there's an aquifer under Ohio, and just the fact that it's using water from the aquifer and the risk of it drowning farmers. If it's a family with lots of children and they're probably already struggling to pay their bills, I comment on the concerns that this will continue to increase your utility rates that you've probably already seen double in the last couple of years. So my talking points are usually just with, you know, the initial brief interaction I have with the people that are in front of me is, where will this affect them the most? So there's some people that you can talk about the concerns with artificial intelligence and some of the more deeper concerns with some of this, but I try to gauge my talking points based on where I've, you know, think that it might affect these people, what the data centers might do.
That's a great point. And I agree as well. And if you go on the website, we actually have a document on there called Circulator Talking Points. That if you circulate the petition and get signatures, it's a primer and it tells you, you know, some talking points. And there's tons of materials on the website that talk about it from all angles. And I agree with Nicole, like this has something to do with everybody in the state, regardless of if they realize it or not, you know, and in my opinion, it does speak directly to the statewide corruption, which also incidentally speaks directly to all the things that are going on in the federal government. Because in many ways, Ohio has strong ties to that. And for me personally, I always phrase it as like, you know, a babushka doll of concerns: environmental, economic, you know, again, similar situation with like the communities. For me personally, the two that keep me up at night the most are the environmental impacts, which we can afford so little more of harm to the environment and the ecology. Like there is such a razor thin margin that we are living in right now with the climate and with the earth. Like we can afford precious little additional loss. And then the other thing is, you know, to Nicole's point, I've always been a, you know, my daughter's right here. I'll come and tell you goodnight, okay? In a little bit. Cool. Is the AI piece. I fully believe that is yes, Candy, that is exactly why they are trying to shut us up and exactly why they are pushing so hard and exactly why nobody wants to come and help us. And it is exactly why we will not stop and we will not shut up about it, you know? But my other big concern is artificial intelligence, and I cannot, you cannot convince me that does not basically spell ruin for us, you know, social media, artificial intelligence, data privacy, these things that are just gonna, I already had existing concerns about these things.
Surveillance.
Surveillance, yeah. And when you put those elements on steroids, my concerns go on steroids, you know? And at the end of the, you know, and like I like people that always say, well, they're bringing jobs or it's going to bring this or that, you know, I always say like, because the developers want to get you lost in like the, you know, going back tit for tat, like, well, it's not true. It's actually going to clean the water, you know, this or that. Like in my mind, I'm like, why don't just, I'll concede every one of those points to you, you know, but at the end of the day, the most important things are, this is not what these community want. want. This is not what these communities want. And so you are saying at the end of the day that you know better than the public, and you are going to do it at their expense. And number two, like, why are we not like growing from within? We could employ, I look in Higginsport. When I drive down the main road of my own area, all the buildings on the main road that were once supporting a vibrant community are shuttered and filled with junk. That doesn't make me happy to see. Like, we could easily fix that and employ people in doing that and put in a local bank and this and that. Like, if we can develop artificial intelligence literally as a species, like, I don't believe it when somebody says putting a data center in is easier to revitalize the community than actually revitalizing the community. Like, you can't tell me that's the answer. So, but yeah, there's something that should be concerning to everybody. And all those materials are on the website. If you need some help with the talking points. And at the end of the day, that kind of the overarching talking point, like, could be like, look, even if you want the data centers, you ought to have a choice. Me, our neighbors, everybody ought to be the ones making the choice. The choice should not be made for us. And so the constitutional amendment, you could sign a petition so that you had the choice to vote and say no, that you want data centers. But the meaningful thing is that you were able to choose. And to me, at least, because, and the other thing, to Ariel's point, is that's been so distressing to figure out, is like, there is such a mingling of public and private interests in this state. It seems like every time somebody does a bit of due diligence and like tries to figure out like where this money went or where this went or whatever, the road ends at some like private company that got like a public contract to like take on the debt and liabilities, and then they pocket the money that was going to be set aside to fix it, and now all of a sudden they don't have enough money to do it. So now it's just going to sit there, if an old like, for example. So there has been such a mingling of public and private enterprise that it's difficult. But you know what? We're here on this meeting together. 2 months, 3 months ago, I didn't know, I wasn't doing anything. And we're here together now. And one of the first things I did was just text a few friends of mine and was like, "What's up, guys? Like, just quit my job. Like, what's the game plan?" And one of my friends was like, "There's really nothing we can do. Like, this sucks, but I don't know if we can do anything." And I was just like, "Dude, I reject that. Like, all we can do is step on the path." That's what I keep thinking to myself when it feels overwhelming and hard. I just remind myself that I have stepped onto the path. And as long as I keep stepping on the path, then nothing else matters. Because whatever happens, I can say that I did my best. I stood with my community. I stood up for people. And in the end, that is literally all that we have, and I meant to say this up front. This is a faith meeting. And I wanted to say, like, my own personal faith journey has also been a big part of this. I and my wife are what you might call like searchers. I grew up Catholic, but I also had experience with like the Protestant community. I went through a period of time where I was an atheist. I went through a period of time where I explored Buddhism. My wife and I explored Wicca, those spiritualities. And we were members of the United Unitarian group in Anderson. So we've searched out what we have, the meaning of things, if you will. And ultimately, all of that education and searching kind of just resolved itself into a simple type of spirituality and like trusting the path, following what your heart tells you to do, trusting people that you meet along the way, like Nicole, you guys that are on this thing. And again, at the end of the day, all we have is each other, and all we can do is stay on the path together and put our brains together and figure out what we can do. And I take solace in knowing that. And I feel, even though I feel, like we were laughing about at the beginning, a lot of existential anxiety, I also feel a sense of inner peace that I did not have when I worked at the firm, for example, because at the firm I was in a moral conflict, and now I feel that I'm not, and I would not trade that back, even though it's stressful and in my court cases they are coming after me and whatnot, like that's okay because I think of everybody that I've met and everybody that is putting themselves out there just the same as I am, and they may have unfathomable resources and money at their disposal, but I believe that we also have something that they cannot fathom, and that's our faith in each other and our resolve and our humanity. And we will see what happens in the end with that.
I think something beautiful is going to happen.
I
And
agree.
and one of the reasons why I think so is when you think that Governor DeWine was talking about, oh, isn't this great? We're going to have this huge data center up near New Albany, and now look at all the citizens who feel so profoundly troubled that even the state legislators are starting a little bit to say maybe we shouldn't give them the big sales tax abatements. But I'm remembering the moms sitting around kitchen table um, near the Fernald facility a generation ago. Maybe you hadn't even been born, Austin, and they decided they were going to sue the federal government. They couldn't, so they sued the contractors that operated the Fernald plant and polluted their wells with radioactive waste.
Yeah.
And they won. And then they went to the state of Washington and they told the people outside the nuclear facility there how to do what they did.
Yep.
They
Yep.
won.
Yep. I believe that we will win in the end, whether it's the petition, whether it's something new, whether it's just the weight of the communities pushing back. I believe that we will prevail. I don't know how far down the path we'll have to go, and how many data centers, may get put in the meantime, but I have faith and I have hope and I have trust in myself and my neighbors, which is you guys.
Austin, is there language in the amendment limiting the number of 25 megawatt data centers? It seems to me that the developers could say, right, okay, well, this establishes a new way of doing business. We're going to blanket
Yeah. So to that point, Mr. Parsons or Jim, can I call you Jim?
Yeah, Jim.
Okay. That's a great point. One of the things, and Chris, I'll type out. Well, I'll answer your question in a minute too. But Jim, to your point, one of the difficulties, one of the two hurdles that we had to get the petition through in order to kind of get the green light to get the signatures was getting it certified by the Attorney General. And one of the threshold requirements of getting it certified by the Attorney General is the fact that, or I'm sorry, the ballot board, my bad. This is the ballot board. They have to determine that the petition is only one issue. It only does one thing. And so if we had tried to jam in there, even like even using creative language, something that said like, you can't build a new one over this and we're limiting the amount, they would have, they readily could have invalidated or split the petition in that sense. So we had to basically make a choice as to kind of one thing.
Yeah.
But that's great. But I love that question. That's a great question. And like
just imagining a data center network, which would be a new thing, and it may have technical advantages that they haven't thought of yet.
Correct. And those are good questions too. And I talked to somebody about this. My answer to that would be, so a couple things, and I'm fine if everybody to stay on for a little bit after to answer these questions. So is that okay, Ariel?
Is it Becca? What do you think? Is that okay with you? Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Maybe we can stay till like 8:45 or so, and then I'll tell my kids goodnight and everything. But we can schedule another one too if you want. Like, just keep me posted. I'm happy to do it. So to your thing about that, somebody else raised that question. It's a good question. I would say a couple things. One would be like, again, the cost benefit, like at the very least, it would be more expensive for them to do that. And so hopefully they would think twice. And then number two, that spreads it out which gives local communities more ability to push back. So that's what I would say. But then the second thing I would say is, let me pull up the petition and so I can give you, we did try to anticipate that in the language of the petition by saying, so let's see, it's at the end of the, there we go. Okay. Data center shall mean one or more buildings or physical facilities or infrastructure located on a single real property parcel or on contiguous, adjacent, or otherwise aggregated real property parcels. So that term, that phrase, otherwise aggregated, I would argue would capture what you're saying about like, well, what if they, put them in all over the state and then kind of beneath that, like linked them up or whatever, and then it's like one fruiting body or mushroom system kind of thing. I would argue that the aggregated would catch that and say, you can't kind of get around it that way. Okay, Chris, to your question, and then I think I saw Marcia say something. But those are great questions, Jim, and worth asking. That thing to repeal it, I think this was told to me and it seemed pretty reasonable, would basically be if you had, so my understanding of that thing that they just put in, if I'm thinking of the same thing you're talking about where they can't talk about the incentives, like they're not allowed, they'll get liability if somebody asks them like a public records request, for example, of like any tax incentives that have been applied for. The way you would have to do that is you would probably have to get like a public official who's willing to risk that liability and get them like in trouble, if you will. And then they get in trouble and get the liability, and then they get a lawyer, and then you argue that they shouldn't. Then you can argue the constitutionality of it. So it would require a public official to kind of quote unquote like take the dive, if you will, in order to be the case. And you see that a lot in the law, where they will do that, like if you're trying to get something to overturn or whatever, they'll find somebody who's in the right position and be the willing like participant in that. And again, like I would love to try to run that up the chain. If I could clone myself.
Is
Yeah.
it in fact against the House rules to pass something that's not on the bill itself? So they passed something on college athletics and they snuck this in
Yeah,
about,
unfortunately, no. I mean, I remember my
That's a
social
Christmas
studies.
tree bill. That happens all the time, especially during lame duck.
Yep. I can recall my old social studies textbook calling it pork. They'll add the pork to the law and bury it in the fine print. It's freaking crazy, honestly. Like,
but
it's
I thought that they had cleaned it up so that they were now enforcing it. Apparently I was wrong.
you might know more than maybe I'm not sure, to be honest.
Well,
But
I've
yeah,
contacted both my representative, my House person hasn't contacted me. Teresa Gavarone is acting like she knows nothing about this. And she's saying, well, we're trying to get a non-disclosure signed right now. And I've been told that she was responsible for this, one of four people responsible for this being passed in this college athletics thing. I don't know if
yeah.
that's true or not, but
And it's
I'm
difficult.
trying to find out.
And it's
And
difficult because sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean
I'm trying to find out.
Yeah.
I'm having conversations. I've asked to meet with her, but she hasn't answered when I sent my last thing about how it was illegal. She hasn't replied, and I've asked to meet with her.
Good. Keep the pressure on, I would say. And the other thing that's difficult too is like I've been to these council meetings where these elected officials will literally just lie outright.
They
Just
lied. I had a freedom of
straight up lie.
I had a public records thing, and I found out the New Albany attorney was looking for a data center and basically said that, and they all lied to me about it. And I went to the next trustee meeting and told them, "You are lying."
Yep. And the question is like, what do we do when we have that?
I've told them that
answer
they're
is
not
the
representing
petition.
us. They're not going to get reelected.
Yeah.
And we've lost a lot of people did not get reelected in the last election.
Yep. It's truly frustrating, but that's why, we're working together. So anyway, we got this. That's all I got. At the end of the day, I believe that, I believe that we will figure this out, and people and humanity will truly prevail, because that's just what I believe, faith.
Maybe worth
I'm
is
trying to
why.
remember the chronology of Love Canal and the various environmental laws that were passed. Well, certainly Silent Spring, when that book was written in the early 60s, we had basically no environmental law. And a decade later, we had all the major laws that we're still relying on today that the Supreme Court is trying to eviscerate. But it had to start with one person noticing the death of birds
Yep.
and
And
writing about it.
one of my favorite things that I've learned is that I have not seen these yet, but apparently in Adams County, they have the only, I don't want to misquote this, but they have a tiny little species of freshwater jellyfish, and apparently they are bioluminescent in the fall. And incidentally, they are, I believe, at risk from all of this, but it is my hope. But at the same time, I only learned about them through this, and it is my hope to see these little jellyfish in September. So you bet I'll be taking pictures because yeah, it's all connected, and we are all part of the world just as much as the world is part of us. And it's difficult when you have people in power that seem to have forgotten that even they themselves are part of the natural world, and whether they've left that behind or forgotten or whatever, it's difficult to see people lie and act as though they're not, and I've said this before too. If there was a city council, whoever that was willing to, do an about face and say, you know what, we're sorry, we didn't know, this is the right thing to do, I would get behind them in 2 seconds. I would say, I have your back, I got your back. I know I'm just one guy, but I got a law license. I can defend a lawsuit, so I hope more and more elected officials do that. And in the meantime, we'll keep working on what we're working on. But I really appreciate it. And it's been such a pleasure I appreciate you guys let me have a chance to talk, and you're interested. Again, if you're interested in the petition, go to www.conserveohio. Everything you need is there. You can find signing locations. You can volunteer to circulate the petition. You can find copies of the petition and other materials too. So I really appreciate it. Ariel, thank you so much for reaching out. If you want to do another one, just let me know. I'm happy to.
Okay, we'll want to hear an update. And Becca, thank you very much for setting up this Zoom. Really appreciate it. You guys are wonderful. Keep up the good work. We're praying and rooting for you. And I hope any of us who are not involved in this campaign will get busy and send you lots of signatures before the beginning of July.
Love it. Thank you so much. And shout out Nicole, baby. Champaign County. Good job.
Whoa.
Yep.
Thank you all. Nice to see you.
Nice
Jim,
to see
give
you
my
as
love
well.
to Celeste. Thank you
Take
all
care,
very much for
everybody.
coming. Good night
Thank
to your
you.
little girl, Austin.
Will do. I got a son too. He's in line as well. Don't worry. Later, guys.
Good night.